Okay. Good evening. This is the September 7th, 2017 meeting of the Monroe Planning and Zoning Commission. We're in the Town Council chamber. It is now 7:09 p.m. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commission, please introduce yourselves, starting on my right.
Jonathan Formicella, alternate.
Leanna Rosie, Commissioner.
William Porter, Chairman.
Paul Lisi, Commissioner.
Will Augusta, Planner.
Scott Schatz, I am Land Use Group Director and Town Engineer.
Rebecca Wood, Recording Secretary.
Thank you. General public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on an issue that's not related to a public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move on to general appointments. We have none. That brings us into public hearings. Instructions for public hearings. There are two sets of microphones for both public address and recording of the proceedings. Due to the need for recording, it is important to stand at the microphone at all times and speak into it loudly and clearly in order that everyone in the room can hear and to capture what is being said. Individuals speaking from the seats will not be heard and will not be recognized to speak. Order of the hearing of an application. Points of order and responses will be entertained. Exhibits will be read for the record. Applicant and/or representatives will present the application and will answer commission questions. The floor will be open to those in favor. The floor will be open to those opposed. The floor will be open to general comments or questions. The floor will be open to the applicant, who may take the opportunity for closing remarks or rebuttal, after which discussion will close. The applicant or his representatives are the final speakers. No comment shall be accepted from anyone unless recognized by the chair. All questions and comments shall be addressed to the chair, who will determine if an answer shall be provided and by whom. There shall be absolutely no discussion between speakers and audience. The commission has no intention to limit the right of any person to speak, but asks that the speakers try not to be repetitive. Please try to present new information. If something has been said before, the commission would invite you to indicate your agreement with previous speakers. At no time shall there be displays of emotion, such as applause, cheering, shouting, or similar noise. This is critical as this hearing is being recorded. If this happens, you will be cautioned. A vote or demonstration by a show of hands, standing by the audience, or similar action will not be recognized. All parties are requested not to talk between themselves while the hearing is in progress. If you feel a need to talk, please step out into the lobby. All speakers, when recognized, must advance to the microphone to speak. Please state your name and address for the record. The chairman reserves the right to cut off discussion if it is not relevant to the application or is presented in an inappropriate manner. This is a legal proceeding, much the same as what would occur in a courtroom setting. We request that all parties observe the proper decorum that will be observed in that setting. Please turn off all cell phones or similar devices. If you have a need to use these devices, please leave the room and use them outside. All right, item number 5 is a public hearing for 36 Timothy Hill Road. That's been postponed to 9/21. Item number 6, public hearing for 178 Main Street. That's been adjourned to September 21st. SCP 2017-10, file number 1593A, 887 Main Street. That application has been postponed to September 21st. That brings us to item number 8, RAA 2017-08, file number 991E, zoning text amendment, certificate of zoning compliance timing. For the applicant.
Will Augusta, Town Planner representing the Commission. This is a reconvening of the public hearing which we started at your last meeting. I believe majority of the issues that were why we tabled it was for me to spend some time with the town attorney and get some feedback on some of the questions you had. You should have in your packets today the response from the town attorney on those issues. If I can summarize for him, as I understand them, based on my discussions with him and my reading of this, is he acknowledges that you can modify your regulations. So obviously you can make these amendments. The burden to get an extension is on the applicant, it's not the commission. And that the timing of that is that the expiration date is the expiration date. So if they're entitled to an extension, they need to request it and get it from this commission prior to the expiration. Otherwise, it would expire. So in other words, if they were, excuse me, it isn't good enough to just submit a request for an extension prior to the expiration. You would also have to have sufficient time to review that request at a meeting and take appropriate action and grant it in order for it to effectuate. So for instance, if someone wrote a letter asking for an extension 3 days before their expiration, but the next meeting of the commission wasn't for another week, unless you held a special meeting within that 3-day period, it would expire, and that would be the end of it. That's for the statutory timeframes, the 5 years expression. With regards to another question you had with regards to the criteria for public hearing, his response was that you can do that. You can state criteria if you feel that's necessary. I don't think he says it's necessarily necessary because the way you have it drafted and the way it would work, it's at your discretion anyway. So it's up to you whether you want to be more explicit about that or not. He did say to me he didn't think that was necessary, but that's up to you if you thought that was important or appropriate. I think that was, and if you do, I do have some thoughts on how, what you might say, if you're interested in that part.
Well, yeah, we talked about possibly changing the requirement for a 45-day submission to make it a little more open-ended.
Yeah, there was a concern that if you had a 45-day window and someone didn't do it before 45 days, somehow that could be challenged to be, if you took action or something on that application, if it came in 20 days before. The town attorney, although it didn't say it in the letter, he did tell me that he didn't think that was an issue. The point is that it's in your discretion to give the extension. If you do it in the course of your business and they didn't meet that 45 days, it's really not, it's not an issue he thought was appealable, really. I mean, you could appeal anything, but it wasn't necessarily something that the courts would deem a mandatory issue because you have the discretion by statute to grant the extension. And as long as you did it appropriately in a meeting, I mean, that's all, because there's no notice factor. So no one would necessarily have a notice. It would be on your agenda, so that would be the notice. So anyone would have whatever. It doesn't give any more notice to somebody.
Right. I think, though, that
But you could
one of
change
the
that.
issues that some of the commissioners had was that 45 days, so I think we should reword that.
Okay. So the options there is you can make it a different time frame. You could make it a time frame that is, you know, words of the effect of shall be timely, but must be prior to expiration in order for the commission to act at a meeting, a scheduled meeting or something like that, and that it's recommended that it be, 45
I
days.
think
Yeah.
would be good. Leon, that was one of your concerns, right?
Yeah, that was one of them.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
I don't.
All right, let's start with Jonathan, see if there's any questions or comments.
Sure. I would be in favor of amending the language to something shall be timely prior to expiration, as well as did the town attorney look into any language for the use of a public hearing, any criteria for that?
I asked him about that, he didn't, because his reaction to that was that the way it's written, it's in your discretion regardless. But as I said I would do, I did look at some things, and I can pass some thoughts out if you want to look at that.
Sure. Well, do you have a copy of this you can put up on the board? If not, don't worry about it.
No, I don't think so. I can't get into our network.
You can, but you gotta log in under,
Why don't you just run through it, Will?
Okay. Again, these are suggestions, you can be reworded, or you can drop some, add some, whatever. So the first one is changes in circumstances within the surrounding area or environmental setting. Changes in applicable regulations affecting the use and/or development of the property. Changes in plan of conservation and development. A matter of potential adverse effect on neighboring property or the public health and safety. Potential for public interest. Again, you're talking about something that could be 5 years out from when it got an approval. In some cases, some of our projects, it could be 9 years out because there was that period when there was the Public Act which granted another 4 years. A lot of time goes by, things in the town could change. So those are the kinds of things we're focusing on. And again, in all instances, it still would be discretionary. It's not intended to be a mandatory thing.
So right now, it's very wide open that the commission can require a public hearing, correct? Without
Yeah.
any clarification as to,
In the broadest sense, you wouldn't necessarily need it. I think obviously that given that you are made up of several people, there would be a discussion and there'd be some rationale for why it's necessary. Short of that, it would have to be a resounding, everybody thought it would just be right and there'd be no reason because they would, or no specific reason. But I don't think that ever really would happen. It usually would come from one or two people and then you'd have a discussion.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to limit it to these 5 bullets necessarily.
well, that's just it. If we start identifying specific reasons for a
Yeah.
public hearing, that limits it to those.
Right, so I don't know if we want to do that. If there's some other, if there's another reason, then
Wouldn't
we
you,
feel almost obligated to not accept it.
wouldn't you, the 5th bullet point, potential for public interest, wouldn't that be broad enough for that?
Not necessarily. There could be some issue that the applicant has. I would say that we would not want to be specific.
No, and like you said, this could be a project that was approved 8 or 9 years previous, and any number of things could have changed in that time period.
Right. And the public hearing isn't the same as the public hearing you had at the original. It's really to kind of delve a little bit more into those changes. And you would only focus on that aspect of the project. And it's really for granting an extension. It's not, not redesigning the project.
Right.
No, and I don't think that the commission would have the ability
Yeah, you
to
don't.
make additional requirements of the project.
No,
It's simply whether you extend it or not.
right.
Okay. Jonathan, any other questions?
No further questions.
Leon?
So, Basically, the reason why we're putting this text amendment is to give somebody a temporary CO, right? Now, what about the building department as far as, public health and safety? Basically, he has the say in that first. And so what if somebody doesn't do something in the building department and they come in here, they want us to give a temporary CO and that's not done yet? How do we handle that part?
We're not giving temporary COs.
What are we giving? Extension?
What this is doing is, you have an approval. The approval has conditions. One of the conditions is you basically finish everything that's in that plan, which includes the building. That's not the only part of it.
Right.
And that, the way they're written is you complete those things. When you complete those things, the zoning enforcement officer makes an inspection and determines the project to be completed in accordance with your approval. The building inspector, no matter what shape that building is in, can't issue a CO until that happens.
There's a certificate of zoning compliance.
Right.
And a certificate of occupancy. Sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, but they're two distinctly separate
The
things.
zoning compliance has to happen first.
Yes.
So that supersedes what you're saying, I believe.
There could still be things in the building not done, and the zoning compliance could be issued. But not the other way around.
Yeah, but the reason why we're doing this text amendment is so we can have somebody open up without finishing stuff on the outside.
No, that's not at all.
What are
That's
we
not
doing?
what this text amendment is doing at all. That
What's it doing?
already is sort of the law. We're simply clarifying what the current practice is. Staff has been doing conditional type COs without any authority under the code. This is clarifying that the commission doesn't want that to happen anymore. The commission wants to be the one to decide on the conditional CO.
Conditional certificate of zoning compliance.
Certificate of zoning compliance. And truthfully, to be technical, we don't need the amendment for that, because that is what the law says presently. We're just not
No.
practicing that way.
Right. But I think me personally, and that's just me personally, I think that you have the building department that can sign off on his stuff. And then it comes to what the staff thinks is adequate. And like I was saying, that, you have somebody that's not going to do it, I'm in for, okay, bring him in front of the commission, and then we'll talk to him. I was into give him a 30-day window or give him a 60-day window or whatever, and then if it doesn't get taken care of, then bring it in front of the commission. That's work. We have to rely on the staff in order to tell us that, especially with the building department, everything's all set in the building department before it comes in front of us, because I wouldn't want to give out any kind of, extension.
It goes, before it goes to the building department, it goes to zoning. There has to be a certificate of zoning compliance issued before they can go for a certificate of occupancy. Certificate of zoning compliance is issued by the zoning.
So that doesn't go hand in hand?
Certificate of zoning compliance is issued by the zoning department.
No.
A certificate of occupancy is issued by the building department.
Right. But don't you have to have the occupancy part,
No.
or
You have to have the zoning
what about the work
compliance
to be
first.
done in the building?
You have the zoning compliance first. And so long as it's zoning compliant, then it goes to the building department.
There are things inside the building that the building department is looking at, that zoning really isn't looking at.
No, I have that.
Like if
I
they have to
know,
have
I
a
got
certain
that.
latch on the doorknob or the
Right,
certain
no,
width of the door.
I got all that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, we're giving somebody an extension on, but what if it relates to something that's the building department
Well, let me give you
Look
this
at.
instance. Forgetting whether it's staff or whether it's you. A conditional certificate of zoning compliance, let's say that becomes a determination that there's 5 things left to be done on the approval
Right.
that's related to the building or related to the site, either one, related to the project, that aren't done. But they want their certificate of zoning compliance, and they may want their certificate of occupancy as well, because they want to open. Even if we, as staff or as the commission, grant the modification to the approval and give a conditional CO, putting those things off to another date, the building inspector is empowered to issue the CO because he's got the certificate of zoning compliance in hand. He's not required to. He could say, well, those 2 things, or I have other things that aren't done, and they're not getting the CO until they do those things. That's up to him. That is not up to you.
We don't have jurisdiction over,
Yeah.
over the building.
No, I know that, I understand that. I'm
So
saying
we're not
that-
really what we're doing is, if anything, we're empowering the building inspector to give a CO sooner than otherwise, because the building could be done, but let's say the handicap parking isn't marked, or the lighting isn't in the parking lot.
Right, but even if we do this, we're gonna probably require some kind of a bond,
You can't require the bond.
so we can't require
You
anything.
can't require
if they
performance
didn't
bonds
finish
for
something.
non-public work. But in that process, the applicant can agree to a bond because he's asking for something outside of what the approval is saying. So he can give you the bond, the performance bond, to get his conditional CO. Because he's asking for something for you to modify. Therefore, he's giving you the bond to ameliorate that. You can't require that.
What do you mean, but he has to offer it?
Like, for instance, forget this for a second. You get an approval on the project, you take site stabilization bonds. You do not take performance bonds. In a subdivision, you take a performance bond on the public work because it's public work that could go to the public entity. That's why you take performance bonds, because ultimately it's going to be owned by a public entity. Private work in the state of Connecticut under zoning cannot be a performance bond requirement of you.
Well, you said, for example, you take the site stabilization bond.
That's different. We're
That's-
allowed to
that's
take the site
specific for that.
stabilization, it's only for stabilization. It's not to perform the landscaping plan.
Right, right.
It's to seed the lawn and get it stable.
Right. I thought there was a general bond for site work,
There's no performance bonds in private
Just a
work.
stabilization bond.
just stabilization?
Rebecca, please note for the record that alternate commissioner.
And that's relative to zoning. I don't, wetlands may have a different thing. I don't know what their requirements are, but under zoning, that's the only financial, it's called a financial guarantee. It's only for stabilization, it's not performance. We can take the performance on, again, if they're doing a public water line, if they're doing a public sidewalk, a road, those things you can take performance bonds on.
Do you have any other questions? Paul?
No, again, I just want to repeat that. I don't think, we should be specific in the criteria. And I agree, we need to clarify the 45 days. And I would just ask if staff has any comments, any follow-up comments regarding the town attorney's letter.
Bruno, just to bring you up to speed, we talked about, we asked the town attorney about the 45-day requirement for granting extensions. And pretty much the general consensus was that we can do that. And if someone came in 20 days before, we could still take their application or grant their request for an extension. We're not limited by the 45 days, but we discussed the possibility of, just to make things a little cleaner and clearer, we're going to change it from a requirement of 45 days to a recommendation of 45 days with wording that any application for an extension be submitted in a timely fashion. Because if an applicant has expiration of the 10th of the month, and on the 8th of the month, they submit a request for an extension, but we don't have a meeting between the 8th and the 10th, their application would expire. So it's incumbent upon the applicant to get that request in enough time for the commission to act on it.
Before they
So
expire.
that's why we're going to suggest 45 days. I don't know if you had any other questions.
No, I think the recommendation is better than a deadline of 45 days. It does allow some leeway. And if it makes it easier for people to do stuff in town that way.
Well, the most thing it does, it takes the legal gray matter out of it.
Okay, my only comment is that, right now we have a process that the staff has been following, which is not really backed up anywhere by town zoning regulations. And by enacting this amendment, it just clarifies what the requirements and the procedures are, so there's no questions going forward.
After last meeting, the whole idea of Monroe being a difficult town to build in and that kind of stuff, I don't know how soon that's gonna leave if we don't make some of these changes to,
It's interesting you should say that. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've read articles in the Connecticut Post about Stratford zoning being difficult and not business-friendly, Bridgeport not being business-friendly, Milford not being business-friendly. So I think that's...
No, I know it's not just us,
it's,
obviously. And I don't even know how much, it could always be easier, yes? It could always be easier to do something. I just feel I want to get rid of people not coming to Monroe because they feel it's too hard to do business. And if something like this will help, I'm all for making it easier to have people come in and build and do business and stuff in town. It's never going to be perfect.
Right.
It never will be perfect.
And one perspective here is, we're talking about someone has an approval. Well, I guess at any time they want the certificate of
But
occupancy,
this-
it's important. I was
this
going to
is-
talk about the time they have to do it.
This is not gonna make it easier for an applicant in any aspect,
It's going to clarify the process.
right? But it's not gonna make it easier.
It's not going to make it harder.
I think it makes it a little bit easier than harder.
No, because they have to set an appointment, they have to come into a meeting.
Right, but right now it states that we need 45 days if we have,
No, that's
No,
a different
that's
thing.
different.
Those are two unrelated items. The certificate of occupancy issue and certificate of zoning compliance issue is one. The 45-day extension isn't about the certificate of zoning compliance. It's about the approval.
okay.
You grant an approval, it has a 5-year window. What you're saying is, before that 5 years is up, you're entitled to potentially another extension of another 5 years under state statutes, but you have to request, the state statute says you have to request that. All you're saying is, you're telling them about it in the code, and hey, do it 45 days ahead of time, because we want enough time to give it to you, so you don't expire. So that's something totally different. I mean, if someone hasn't built their thing out in 5 years, if they can't get it 3 months before they expire to get a request for another 5 years, there's something wrong with that.
My
That's not
thought
what-
process is there's stuff that happens too. There could be a million different reasons why they don't get it done within their 5 years.
No, and I'm not criticizing that. My point is that if you haven't done it in 4 or 5 years, it's not like it's on your mind. I mean, in a 5-year period, you can't get a request for another 5 years within a 3-month end window of that 5 years. I mean, if you have to wait till the last day of that,
I don't feel they should wait till the last day either,
yeah,
but sometimes stuff happens where maybe you start working on it late and
yeah,
you get to within 45 days and you think you're going to be done,
right.
and then you want that extension because you're 2 weeks out and you realize you're not going to be done.
Well,
When at 45 days you thought you were going to be.
we would have been talking to them much sooner, which we do. When it comes to extensions, staff goes out of its way to remind applicants of their time constraints and that they need extensions. And we generally schedule these things for the very next meeting from which they ask, and that sometimes is 3 days before a meeting, before we publish the agenda. So if anything, staff is overly accommodating with regards to extension for several reasons. One, because we know and we've learned that they're not so good at paying attention to their own approvals and the timelines on their approvals, and that's the truth. The second is, it doesn't help anybody for it to expire just to come back and go through it all again. So it saves them time and money, saves us time and energy, and saves all you guys time as well. So when it comes to extensions, I think the staff is pretty good about keeping up on those things. Again, that's a separate issue from the certificate.
Again, I'm not saying you're not, or the staff is not, I'm just saying, I want Monroe to be a place where people want to build and not have that idea of it's difficult and all that kind of stuff. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, if there's nothing else from this side, let's open it up to the floor.
Okay.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Any general questions or comments?
Thank you, Chairman Porter. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here at 501 Main Street in Monroe. I apologize, I missed the very opening of this presentation. I know the town attorney offered a letter. I caught the last half of that. My one question was, did the town attorney offer any opinion if the proposed language results in any potential contradictions or conflicts with other state statutes or building codes?
I believe he said there was no conflict.
Okay, so my only concern with that would be we've talked about Amendment 1 for a while, and the current language reads, no permanent certificate of zoning compliance or certificate of occupancy for a building, structure, or use subject to commission approval shall be issued until, and it establishes parameters. So the key word there is permanent certificate of zoning compliance or certificate of occupancy. The state building code, section 111, provides occupancy and temporary occupancy, and it enables and empowers building officials to issue temporary certificates of occupancy, conditional certificates of occupancy, partial certificates of occupancy for buildings if they complete a certain portion or things like that. It enables the building official to allow an applicant or property owner to use a portion of the property, whether temporarily or a portion of it, or et cetera, as long as certain aspects are covered. The proposed amendment says use and/or occupancy of approved site buildings, structures, site improvements, and uses shall not be authorized until the applicant owner obtains a permanent certificate of zoning compliance. So my reading of this language explicitly prohibits the building official to issue a certificate of occupancy from a temporary standpoint or a partial standpoint, which the building code enables them to do. The current regulation says no permanent certificate of zoning compliance or occupancy can be granted unless. But what this says is you can't use any of it at all until that permanent certificate has been issued. I think that presents a problem or a potential challenge that could probably be worked through with some additional language. Again, regarding the 45-day timeframes, I think I offered testimony at the last public hearing regarding this. I think the current, I do want to applaud staff because I think staff does a tremendous job of working with applicants to say, hey, your timing is up, we need to get a letter in, things like that, and that's very appreciative because not every applicant is necessarily dotting those I's and crossing those T's, as Will said, and that's appreciative that staff does go above and beyond. Again, with the 45-day language, I know we've talked about making it a recommendation, it should be timely, et cetera, but I strongly urge the commission to adopt language that's how your current approvals are written, and that it says an applicant has to make a request prior to the expiration, and the commission can act upon that, even if the next hearing the commission can act upon is after the expiration date. I think that gives the most flexibility, the most leeway. When you put in, when you again, things happen. And the last thing this commission wants to do is to have an applicant bring a project back before the commission because the thing expired for whatever reason, and then everyone has to go through the time and effort of having new public hearings and new application fees and new review comments and things like that. I just think if the commission is going to adopt something in this regard, they should do something more consistent with how your current approvals are written and not with the 45-day time frame, at least for extensions. I think the discussion regarding the 5-year extension, in order for the life of the permit, if you want to put parameters in there for that to be in a timely fashion or even 45 days in advance, I think that's fine and reasonable when you really look at it in the grand scheme of things. But in terms of satisfying those conditions of approval and having that being tied to a recommended time frame or making sure that it happens at a commission hearing before the expiration, sometimes things happen. Sometimes the commission has to cancel a meeting for whatever reason. Sometimes multiple commissioners, what happens if something happens and multiple commissioners can't make a meeting?
Well, if they submit 45 days in advance, there's a good chance, or there should be 2 meetings within that window.
Sure, I understand that, but what if a hurricane comes through and there's flooding and something happens? You have to, again, I understand the reasoning behind this and that you want to prevent the bad apples from at least for the CO stuff. You want to prevent the bad apples from doing that, but as I stated at the last hearing, I don't think that...
You may have walked in a little bit after this, but we've already said that we want to take the 45 days from a requirement
to recommendation. Yep. I did hear that again. I just wanted to say, and I understand the town attorney said that it's unlikely that a judge would consider that, but the last thing that you'd want to do is to just open up something that could move to litigation. Just even if we think that the judge is going to say, oh, it doesn't matter, why do you want to open up a window for someone to challenge to make it go to court? So,
Thank
that's
you.
it. Thanks.
Anyone else with any general questions or comments? Will?
I mean, I tend to agree, it's not worth spending money to go to a court to find out that we actually are right, but, you've come up with a solution to deal with that issue, I think. The town attorney, and I concur with the town attorney, when it expires, it expires. Statutory authority to extend approval past the expiration date. That's pretty clear and plain. That's, again, a statutory timeframe. The one that we have been using that goes beyond the timeframe isn't a statutory timeframe, it's a zoning regulation timeframe that you've set, and you have that liberty to extend that, and what you've done is you've allowed the 180-day timeframe, which you require at the beginning of when you give an approval to get the plan signed before you file the approval. You have that 180 window. That's where we've allowed the extension to come in before it expires, and we can have it at a meeting after the expiration. Again, that's not a state statute expiration timeline. That's your self-imposed timeline. There you're on much better ground, but the 5 years is the 5 years. The state doesn't give you anything more than that. If an applicant gets it in on a timely matter, they messed up. When bad things like hurricanes happen, I'm not sure what happens in those situations. Obviously, that's a different situation, whether there's any extenuating circumstances from it. Legally, technically, probably not, but, you can't regulate for a hurricane.
Right. I do have a question concerning Mr. Soli's comments about paragraph C, where we specifically require a permanent certificate of zoning compliance.
Yeah, thank you, that was my first. That, I believe, the way this is being addressed is that, yeah, that is what the rule is, that's what your approval says. But if you go to item 3, that gives an out. That's them coming to you and saying, look, I can't get these things done. I'm giving you a performance bond. Give me a conditional CO so I can then get my certificate of occupancy and open up.
So
That's what 3 is about.
We do give them an avenue then to go forward without a permanent.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so we're going to require them to have a performance bond.
Well, we're requiring them if they want something special.
Well, no,
Your
we want them an extension.
first requirement is you get everything done, and then you get your certificate of zoning compliance. That's the rule of the law, okay? That, what I'm saying, when you give that approval with that condition, you're not empowered to require a performance bond. What you're doing is you're giving someone of an exception for that. When you get to exceptions, you can do other things. Because they do not have to ask for this.
No, what that says there is we're gonna require a performance bond.
Only for the exception.
Only if we give the exception.
What you're saying is that if you want
Not any-
something
Don't, stop
different,
calling it an extension, because you're confusing the extensions of an approval to the temporary zoning compliance. So if they want a temporary certificate of zoning compliance that says, we are 95% done, and we have this, and this left to do that we can't finish for whatever reason,
I got that.
we will issue them a temporary certificate of zoning compliance so that they can then apply for their certificate of occupancy.
But we're gonna require a performance bond.
Yes.
you're requiring it, but you're not making it a condition of approval. They are coming in and requesting you to do something with the understanding that they're gonna give you that. That's a lot different than getting an approval and you saying, I'm giving you approval to build, but you're giving me this. Because they have their approval already. They got what they asked for. This is something more than what they asked
Well, it's
for.
not approval to build, but it's
No,
approval
the
to
first thing,
occupy.
the first was the
Right.
approval to build, you meet the conditions of the code. Now they're asking for something beyond that, which is, give me more time to do these three things left on my approval. So it's different than you requiring it. It's a subtlety, but,
But you are telling them that in order for you to.
well, if you want that, you have to do it. But again, you don't need to go there to get an approval, and that's
Not
what
the
I'm talking
approval,
about. That's
not
what
the
I'm talking
approval,
about.
but to get the,
Yeah, because
occupancy.
you're not supposed to do it that way, you're supposed to
Right.
get it done.
right. That seems to make sense. And I think that's where Leon was going.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Will, anything else?
Did you have something, Leslie?
No, I mean, can we make it, we may require a performance bond? Or we're gonna do that in every one? I understand that, but it all depends on what the circumstance is. The guy didn't put in one of his, like, a ball or something like that, or one curb or something like that. I mean, that's
The
something
bond,
limited.
the amount of the bond would be related to what work is remaining to be completed.
Right.
You know, if he's got 5 shrubs to go in, but it's February, versus he has the final course of paving to go down, you know, there's a big difference in value there, and it would be bonded accordingly.
And you want the bond, otherwise it's gonna drag out
And in
potentially.
most instances, they already have a bond on file, it's basically converting the bond or a portion of the bond into a different status. So it's not like they're really creating a new bond. I mean, they're creating
You know, at
the mechanism of the
like-
bond.
Like Will was
They're
saying,
creating a new bond, but they're not.
Yeah. they're
at the
not
point that
finding
that they
more
would
money.
be requesting this, their site stabilization bond would still be being held, but the site would be stable at that point. So a portion of that bond could be converted to a performance bond.
Right, be mostly paperwork.
Staff loves paperwork.
Was that?
Staff loves paperwork.
All right, anything else? All right, what do we want to do with this? Open, close?
I say close.
I wanna keep it open, I wanna look at this.
Jonathan?
I'd say close.
Close.
Leon, you're outvoted on that. Hearing's closed. Moving on to site plan review, item number 9, SDP 2017-03, file 123, 233, 235, Monroe Turnpike, LOR District, conversion of existing residence to professional offices. Will, do we have new
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up.
exhibit?
the date of the last meeting?
The last meeting was the 24th, I believe.
August
It was 2
or-
meetings ago.
This was 2 meetings, okay.
It was end of July, beginning of August.
Okay. Exhibit 21, letter granting time, yeah, letter granting time. Exhibit 22, updated plan set. Exhibit 23, two-sheet plan set showing truck train entering exit plan. Exhibit 24, water quality volume calculations. Exhibit 25, response to comments by applicant. Exhibit 26, updated planner comments. Exhibit 27, updated town engineer comments. Exhibit 28, email correspondence of updated comments from the building official. That's it.
For the applicant.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here in Monroe at 501 Main Street. I'm here tonight for the continued public hearing for 233 and 235 Monroe Turnpike. Just to orient everybody again, this is an aerial of the town of Monroe. The site is located just north of the town line on Trumbull with Route 111. Route 111 runs north-south, generally in this location here. Just to provide a little bit more orientation, you can see the intersection of 25 and 111 is actually just south of the aerial. But coming up north on 111, 233, 235 on the Turnpike is on the newly constructed Goodwill is here, the post office, Walgreens, south of. So here's an aerial. You can see actually this is Goodwill under construction at the intersection of Purdy Hill Road. Just south of that, south of the intersection with Spring Hill Road, 233, 235 Monroe Turnpike. So the site is currently two residential structures. Actually, there's a main residential home in this location here. The site is zoned LOR. There's a garage and then another rear building, which was actually occupied with some commercial uses over the past several years, but the question to the occupancy for that is a little bit hazy. The site's just under an acre. It's 0.84 acres. What we're proposing is to convert the primary structures, the large residential structure in the front and the rear building into office space and construct 19 parking spaces. The garage that's in this location would be demolished as part of this, and we would widen the existing driveway on Route 111 to accommodate commercial traffic and provide parking behind the facility. I believe at the last hearing, the commission had a couple of comments, and I believe we were actually able to address all of those. I'll just kind of run through those. There were some comments and concerns about the handicap ramp detail, and you guys were looking to see some lattice structure on that to prevent from leaves and things getting into that. We've actually updated that detail to show that with a wooden lattice with a stained finish to match the handicap ramp detail, so that was incorporated into our revised plans. Commissioner requested that we provide floor plans. Now, what was discussed at the last hearing was, at this point, the property owner is looking to get approval for the change of use, but there isn't a tenant identified. So initially, we said, well, we can deal with we were hoping to deal with the floor plan component as part of the building permit application, but nonetheless, we did provide some floor plans of the existing structures. There were some comments from both the town planner and the building department. Obviously, any renovations which aren't currently proposed as part of that are currently proposed, the buildings will have to comply with the building code, ADA accessibility. We acknowledge that, we understand that, the applicant's willing to agree to that as a matter of law and requirement. But we did provide the existing floor plans for the commission so that you have a complete file. There was a request for some additional landscaping along the front of the property. We were actually able to incorporate that. We added 2 more trees along the front. We also added some additional trees towards the rear of the property. I guess there was some concern about walking on the property, creating some visual gaps between our property and the property to the rear. We did add some additional landscaping to help reinforce that screening. They were looking for curbs along the edges of all the pavement. The applicants agreed to provide that, so we've provided curbs throughout pretty much the majority of the property, with the exception of where the handicap ramp accessibility is. We looked at possibly, we looked at relocating the reserve area, so it was a little bit further away from the landscape buffer. We conducted a test pit with the sanitarian and provided that as well, which was one of the health department's comments and one of the town engineer's comments. We did provide that information on the plan. We added some additional landscaping in the rear and the northern side yard, as you can see on a revised landscape plan. For staff comments, I think for the town engineer's most recent comments, I think every one of these are things that we can address and we can work out as part of conditions of approval. For the town planner's comments, comment regarding the site plan, just proper notation for what the Bilco door is. Again, that's perfectly acceptable, that's fine. There were some comments on the floor plans. You know, again, these are existing floor plans because any modifications will have to go through the building permit process. In order to make sure that our application represented a conservative analysis, what we did is we've provided sufficient parking to allow for the entire facilities to be converted to office space. And actually, one point that I want to make, our application currently just says, currently establishes that we're looking for office use. We do have sufficient parking to allow for these buildings to also be used for medical office use, and we would like respectfully to request the commission to incorporate maybe some language in the approval that allows for the applicant to use it for either office or medical office use. And we have been able to demonstrate that if these were medical office buildings, it does require slightly more parking than traditional office, but we do provide the 19 parking spaces necessary to satisfy that medical office parking requirement.
Doesn't the dumpster negate that?
Well, we have the residential,
No, I know, but if you put the dumpster in those 3 spaces, now you have 16 spaces.
yes. So that would restrict some of the space being used as medical office versus
Right.
traditional office.
And what about water usage? Is there a different amount of usage for a medical office versus a standard office?
No, not from a septic standpoint, from a health code standpoint, but that would be something we would have to deal with the health department as part of.
Dentist or something?
I don't believe so. I think the health code is actually pretty ambiguous in terms of the specificity associated with those uses, but we would have to go through that with the health department regardless, independent from this body. The one component that we didn't touch on was, actually, just to go back to Will's comments, you know, I think regarding the rest of the floor plans, I understand that.
Can you just take some of the labels away? You don't have to call it.
Sure.
I just don't want to call them bedrooms, imply that somehow this is because it's going with the approval.
Well, we can just reference them as rooms and eliminate the residential component of the floor
That's all.
plans.
I don't want to apply it to the house.
Yeah, okay. The one other comment that we didn't address, or didn't specifically address, was the request for sidewalks to be installed along the property's frontage. Again, the applicant respectfully requests not to install sidewalks across the frontage. Both properties to the north and to the south don't have sidewalks. So that is the applicant's request. We do have a sidewalk from the building to the road, but if if the commission feels strongly about that one way or the other, you'd certainly have to comply with any conditions of approval. So with that, I'd like to see if the commission has any other questions or concerns.
Okay. Bruno, I'll start with you.
Actually, I don't have many questions. The sidewalks for that area, I don't think they need them for that area. My only question is if you go to medical use instead of office space, you have 3 spaces getting taken up by a dumpster per se, yes?
Potentially.
So currently, the plans for refuse is using residential garbage cans located here behind the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought was that if a dumpster was to be provided in the future or necessary in the future, we could eliminate 3 parking spaces or 2 parking spaces and put them here. We still have sufficient parking if this is an office use, and the dumpster is actually required for us to eliminate 2 parking spaces. If it is medical office, we would have to eliminate or not be able to utilize both buildings for medical office. We could certainly use the entire front facility for medical office, and then maybe the rear portion. And again, unfortunately, I don't have the calculations directly in front of me, but if we were forced to put in, or if it necessitated the need for a traditional dumpster, we would put it in this location here and eliminate parking spaces.
You think you're gonna need a dumpster for,
We
it's
don't-
gonna create
no.
that much more?
We don't believe so. We believe that using those residential garbage cans, even if it was medical office, would be sufficient. You know, using those types of service, you can schedule pickups as needed, you know, things like that. So I don't see
The only
that.
thing I'm thinking is they'd probably use more of the hazard
Right, which gets picked up
daily or whatever.
and independently, correct. So we don't see the need, we don't ever see the need for the dumpster, but we wanted to, in response to staff's comments, wanted to contemplate how that could be provided.
We have to look at the code. I think the code requires that.
Well,
Sort of like land bank.
right,
I don't think, we can look at it, but I don't think you can just say no to it.
and I think that's what we've actually worked with on other applications in the
Right.
past, saying
So
that,
if it has to be shown, it could potentially affect the parking spaces, so how that plays into when,
What kind of dumpsters are we talking about here? Are you talking about the little garbage ones that you could put a fence around?
well,
Or are you talking about like a 10-yard dumpster?
if we needed like a full commercial dumpster that you see in the back of shopping centers or retail developments or, you know, those types of dumpsters, that's the type of dumpster that we would put into these parking spaces. The refuse that we're proposing for these uses would be the smaller, more residential type, you know, with the flip tops that we could screen, which we've provided for.
Which probably would take up, what, 1 space or so?
We're actually able to put it behind the buildings, here.
there's 2 of them. One is,
Right, and the garbage truck has access to that, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yep.
one's there. and
Yep.
one's there.
You'd wheel them out the same way you wheel out your residential garbage.
I don't see, I would need a dumpster.
And again, I think to Will's point
I
is,
understand, if it's code, it's code, I understand.
right. But again, this commission has actually considered this in the past on past applications. We can use this type of trash refuse as long as we can demonstrate we can provide for it to satisfy, to check that box, which I think we've done.
Right, we would hate to see garbage flying all over the place because we need it.
Of course.
But I don't. Thank you for making all the changes, I think it's great. I'm all set.
I just had a quick follow-up on the possibility of dumpster and medical use. If you were going to have a medical office space, you could only do it in one of the buildings, at least that's your impression based upon the parking?
So if the entirety of the development, if both buildings were used for medical office space, it'd be required to provide 19 parking spaces, which we provide.
Right.
Again, if we had to lose spaces to provide for a dumpster, we would be limited on how much medical office space we could provide. I think that could be something that could be worked out with staff in terms of, you know, zoning compliance, as long as this commission enables the permit to include both office or medical office use, provided that sufficient parking is provided.
Okay.
I think that'd be one way to handle it.
Sure. Did you review the document from the chief building official regarding ADA accommodations?
We did, the applicant has, and they recognize and understand that those renovations will be required in order to comply with the ADA requirements. And it's also actually, because of the size, we can actually provide ADA accessible facilities, or in terms of restrooms, in one building which actually serve both buildings. So yes, but the applicant's aware of those requirements and will certainly comply with all those requirements.
Okay. I didn't hear you mention in your statement having utilities go underground rather than the way they're currently situated. What was the applicant's view on that?
So we aren't proposing to change the utility services with the exception of water. The buildings are currently served by a well. The front building currently has a well behind it, and then there's underground water service to the rear building. We are proposing to connect to public water as part of this application. That's certainly underground. But we weren't anticipating or proposing to modify any of the other utility connections that currently service these facilities.
Okay. And finally, about the sidewalk, I don't see a need for the sidewalk. I don't have any further questions.
Yeah?
Well, the only thing is, I'm in favor of the sidewalk. And the only reason why I'm in favor of it is because what the state just put the big sidewalk up north more. They just did all that. And eventually, we're gonna try to connect those sidewalks so people can walk. That's why I'm in favor of it. Because we just put that big stretch of sidewalks up there, and eventually we can probably connect in front of the funeral. And what I'm just saying is, that's the only reason why I'm in favor, because eventually down the road, we're gonna develop the rest of those properties on the road, and I think sidewalks will be good. That's the only question. Everything else you addressed that we get concerned about.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I agree with the sidewalks, that, you know, the intent is that as you develop properties, if you add the sidewalks, that eventually you're gonna have sidewalks on, you know, on this main roadway. So I think the sidewalks is a requirement, is a good idea. And this is the LOR district, so
That's correct.
It's a site plan review, it's not a question of use allowed in this area, right? It's not a matter of.
No, yeah, these are, both office and medical office use is a permitted use in the LOR.
Okay, yeah, the only other comment I have is that if you did go to medical, you may need an elevator in this building, just so you're aware of that.
Yep.
Otherwise, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. I had a question, which I think you answered already. Your parking calculations are based on the actual footage of the floor plans that you provided? The new
Correct.
floor plans, okay.
Yeah.
I had a question at the last public hearing that I overlooked, and I found it again last night. What do you have for a septic system for building number 2, other than a note saying approximate location of septic system?
That's what we have in terms of information. We reviewed this with the health department, and he's reviewed the facilities that are out there, and he's comfortable with this.
He's comfortable with not knowing what you have?
There's a dry well, essentially, which services that back building, but that back building only has essentially like a half bath. And he's aware of it. He's been to the property. He witnessed the test holes. He's provided his health department report regarding the proposal, and he is comfortable with
And
the
right now,
facilities that
there's
exist.
no thought of expanding the facilities in that building?
No. No, because, and it's triggered to the septic system to a point too, because if we were to make other wholesale changes, then there would be other implications that we would have to go down.
Well, that really falls under his purview, but it's just a question that I have.
Yeah.
The only other issue is the sidewalk, and I understand the whole concept of someday, 20 years from now, we may have a continuous sidewalk on Monroe Turnpike, but there are currently no sidewalks south of Walgreens. And, there are several properties there that have been developed, and they do not have sidewalks. If you go north of Walgreens, one of the biggest frontages there is Monroe Elementary School. They don't have sidewalks. So I personally don't think that it's fair to require this applicant to install sidewalks when there's nothing in the area that these are going to, in the near future or even extended future, be connected to. So I am inclined to say that my personal opinion is that we're not going to require sidewalks. But that'll be up to the vote of the commission.
Yes.
I have nothing else. Staff have anything?
Minor housekeeping, they could be addressed. The bond recommendation is $7,000.
And that's acceptable.
All right, well, seeing this is not a public hearing, we don't have to open it to the public. Mr. Solly, do you have any other comments?
Just that, in summation, the project is to convert 2 residential structures to change in use to accommodate office or medical office use for the facility. It is in the LOR district. Our proposal complies with the zoning regulations, and it is consistent with the Plan of Conservation Development, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This isn't a hearing, so we don't close it, right?
Well, you're just recognizing you don't need any additional information, and the next step will be at some point deliberation.
I just have I'm sorry, follow-up question.
Well,
You mentioned-
let me get fast.
Almost got the hammer drop.
The septic system for the main structure, are you saying you're tying into the public utility
No,
sewers?
There are no sewers.
no, I was just asking about this.
This one, but what about this one?
So there, I can touch on
There's
that.
an existing septic system there?
Well, if the health department requires it, they have that capability.
And we don't have any jurisdiction on
Now, if the health department signed off on it, that's their
Well.
deal. That's what they regulate, so.
that. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Next up, item number 10, SDP 2017-04, file number 124, 380 Monroe Turnpike, restaurant expansion. Will, what do we have for exhibits?
Sure, I can do it. What do you got? You got a presentation for me? Just let me see the plan real quick.
These were just handed to me? These were just handed to me. By the applicant.
It's great.
Are these for our next meeting? Sorry, I couldn't read.
Yeah. I thought I was going to talk Kevin into making the presentation for me. I've got one of these great things that we all love. At the end of the summer, I've got a cold.
Okay, the exhibits. There's no pen. I have no pen. Exhibit 1, site development plan application with attachments. Exhibit 2, 4-page plan set by Scott Corcoran. Exhibit 3, notification of planning department public health. Exhibit 4, notification to recurring water company. Exhibit 5, police department comments. Exhibit 6, fire marshal comments. Exhibit 7, town engineer comments. Exhibit 8, town planner comments. Exhibit 9, building official comments. Exhibit 10, plan set revisions. Exhibit 11, response to comments by the applicant. Exhibit 12, parking modification letter from the applicant. Exhibit 13, updated town planner comments. Exhibit 14, updated town engineer comments. Exhibit 15, health department comments. And now Exhibit 16, revised plan set. Is it just plan set? Dave? Just plans, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, for the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, let me. Let me get started. Members of the commission, my name is David Bjorklund. I'm president of the firm of Spath Bjorklund Associates. We have offices here in Monroe, and I'm a professional engineer registered in the state of Connecticut. The application this evening is for Center 111, which is located at 380 Monroe Turnpike. I'm sure all the commission members are familiar with it. This is a shopping center that was constructed in the 1980s by Paul Vazano. Paul Vazano continues to own the center and manage the center. The proposal this evening that we're focusing on in this site plan review is the expansion of Jenny's Pizza. And there has been a vacant space, if you're familiar with Jenny's, right to the left of the restaurant and entry to the restaurant, which is right at the corner of the building. that has never been occupied. It's really kind of odd space. And the proposal here is that Jenny's Pizza saw an opportunity based upon customer demand to open up a small room for catering. The room is a little over 1,900 square feet. That would be a good complement to the office, and as they've indicated, there has been some demand and some requests for it in the area. Not sure why this isn't showing up.
Your disc,
Yeah.
did you put it in the same slot as the one you took it out of?
Yes, I think so, yeah. Put it in the other one.
Yeah, try doing the other. Oh, no, there was, I saw it.
I did too.
No, actually put it back where it was. Huh. All right, Dave, try putting it,
Yeah, let's try the other one. Oh, there we go. Okay.
yeah, I don't think it likes that port.
Working to get it, but it can't.
I had sent them over, I
Oh, you did?
didn't, I don't know if they came over about 3 o'clock.
You just gotta put it,
All right, try putting it in
you
the
gotta
other
put
one.
it back in.
Try one more time putting yours in the other slot. Try one more time. It doesn't like it, does it?
It's worked in the past. I have one,
Yeah, it's going really
I
slow.
have one drive that's just dedicated for Monroe.
Trying to get a new one.
Let me continue on. There have been a couple of additions to the center in the last 4 or 5 years. We added a day spa to the center about 4 years ago, and then advanced auto was added to the center just about 2 years ago. The day spa needed additional septic capacity when they came because of they're considered a high water user. At that point in time, the on-site septic system, which had been prone to occasional failure and had really lived its life, it was decided that we would install a new system. The new system was approved by the State Health Department, and it was installed across the zone and property line, and it straddled into 360 Monroe Turnpike, which is this piece of property just south of this, which has also been owned by Mr. Visano since the 1980s. So it was installed on a piece of property. Part of it was on this parcel, and the other part was on. That created a problem in that the system should have been located on the same lot as the shopping center, but there wasn't. Nobody realized that these were two separate parcels, me included, because when we took over this project from another design engineer, it was fully developed, and at that point in time, There was already portions of the parking lot for 380 Monroe Turnpike had been installed on 360. Drainage had been installed. A DEP permit had been issued for 380, but it covered a piece of 360. And then Mr. Vazano obtained a ZBA waiver, which reduced the buffer requirement between 380 and 360. To eliminate that 30-foot buffer and to put the required landscape buffer on 360 Monroe Turnpike. So since the 1980s, portions of 360 have been utilized for the shopping center on 380. When we came forward with this proposal, and there have been, as I said, 2 other proposals where this was not apparent, it was with this application and the development of the site plan for this that we realized that these properties were really commingled. And that's why we're requesting, because these properties have been commingled for quite a number of years, is that we develop these under the portion of the regulations which permits a consolidated site plan, which permits joint development of adjacent properties and to share site improvements, including parking, access, and utilities. This makes it a little easier in this case because both properties are owned by the same individual. Yeah. And I'm going to present an easement document which has been developed as required under the regulations, which will have the proper easements and agreements granted between the 2 owners, so that there is going to be an agreement going forward until these properties are merged that would permit the joint use of both properties. And this is outlined in your regulations. I haven't used this portion of the regulations in the past, but it is in the regulations, and we're proposing to use it this evening. And to reiterate, we're proposing on sharing parking, drainage, and septic.
Does this require notations on the land records?
The easements?
Yeah,
Yeah, the following
The
easement.
orange one.
so they,
Needs a map and a legal
so
instrument.
one piece of property can't necessarily be sold.
Well, the easement allows them to use the 2 properties, and the easement language is including that kind of language.
Mr. Porter, to answer your question, yes, there's a map that we will see in just a minute, and there's an associated easement document that will have to be reviewed by both the town planner and the town attorney, and then this will be filed on the land records and become permanent.
So 380 is protected
Right.
for their use of that property.
Right. And the parking isn't as critical, but the use of the septic system, of which the majority is on 360, is critical to the operation of 380. And so what this calls for is we can't sell 360. And what we envision happening here is in the future, these properties will be merged when the center is next expanded. Excuse me. If and when the center is expanded, and we will have a need for more parking on 360, and these properties will be merged together. So this,
Is that a different instrument?
yes, it is.
You only have 1 copy? Dave, I got our files up, so the 9/7 is
Oh.
today, so I guess you have your plans.
Okay.
Scroll down.
No, okay. I thought these were in. Okay, here we go.
Have those other copies?
Start to get familiar with the property. This is Route 111 here. This site is located almost directly across the street from Monroe Elementary School. This is the shopping center. If we see that. Well, here we go. Just to orient people, this is the auto parts store. This is the dry cleaners. This is Jenny's right here, and right here at the elbow in the building, there's 1,900 square feet that has never been occupied. As I said, I think the reason for that is it's very unusual and difficult to use space. And so the plan is to, because it's right next door to Jenny's, this would make a great place to add a catering facility. This area here is the area of the proposed septic, the area of the septic easement and where the septic is currently located. So that would get you oriented to the site. And as I said, what we're proposing to do is to see here, this is the survey. What we have here is we have an encroachment of the parking area onto 360 Monroe Turnpike. There's another encroachment here of the parking. Down here, there's quite a large encroachment of the parking. And then there's stormwater drainage that was installed when the original center was developed that was also proposed to be located on 360. And there was also, as I said, a DEP permit issued in this area to fill in wetlands on both pieces of property in order to create the shopping center. One of the prime considerations after we determined that this property was eligible for a consolidated and joint development was to look at the parking. And the property was developed under I think this would be the three generations ago of the parking regulations. It was when this was developed. So I have a copy of those regulations. I'm not sure many people do. But this center was developed under those regulations. And even though there was a variance issued back in the 1980s to reduce 44 spaces from the Zoning Board of Appeals, we still have a parking lot that, in my opinion, is still way oversized for the uses in the center. And there have been a lot of different utilizations of the space in the center. And I'm personally familiar with the center. I go in here about two or three times a month. I use the dry cleaners here, and anybody else who's familiar with it. This front row of parking here is pretty well utilized by the retail stores that are right here. I sometimes see parking into these next two rows. I very rarely, if ever, never see parking over here. And this whole area here is just totally underutilized. And there's about 70 spaces up in this corner on the south end of the development. So in meeting with Will and Scott, we were both, all of us were unanimous is that one thing we didn't need was more pavement added to this site. We didn't need to add any more parking spaces, that what was there and had been constructed could easily take care of this use that we had proposed. But if you look at the existing regulations, we were still short, even with the ZBA waivers plugged in, we were short 13 spaces, or 12% of the total that's required for the site. So what we are requesting is that the commission, and we've done this by a separate letter to the chairman, we're requesting that the commission can grant this reduction in the parking spaces. As I said, it's only 13. I think it's justified by a couple of different things that are happening on the site. One is that if you just look at utilization of the site, even at peak demand for the center, we're only seeing that, we still have at least 50 to 70 spaces that are free. The catering facility is only proposed to use I think it's 13 spaces. And the catering facility, we expect to see that utilization in the evening and on weekends, which will be their heavy time. The retail uses that are currently in the building here, the auto parts stores is open into the early evening, but again, traffic is light. So when what we're basing this on is that when the catering facility is being utilized and the restaurant itself, Jenny's, is being utilized, there's still going to be plenty of parking available at this site. So I don't think that the granting of this waiver or this permission by the commission is going to jeopardize or create a parking issue on the site.
Just to clarify, catering. Do you mean just a banquet room? Is that what you mean?
Right.
It's on-site catering, not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was going to get into the floor plan next.
No, I just want to make sure it's on-site.
Okay.
As opposed to
Yeah.
off-site.
No, Jenny's already does off-site catering. This is a floor plan. It's a little light of the proposed facility.
Enlarge it a little bit or make the focus.
Yeah, let's get the image and I'll do it.
Okay,
That one?
that's it. As you can see, this is, as I said, it's only 1,900 square feet. It's proposed that there's some areas that are going to be used for storage. The existing kitchen for the restaurant is in this area here. So this is a table layout that was given to us by the owner of Jenny's. I think you can see this is not going to be someplace where we're going to have a wedding for 150 people. It's very modest in its proposal. The restaurant already does have a small dining room area where they do have a liquor license, and then they have the takeout facility. So I just don't see where this expansion is going to, in any way, shape, or form, take up the extra 70 spaces that are available at the site on just a regular day. So there were some comments made by staff in Will's most recent letter. We have addressed some of those in the plans that we've submitted this evening. If I could just go through those. With regards to the floor plan, and Will, what had been added here that was incorrect was a proposed wall. This is an existing wall, and the draftsman had labeled that as proposed. So this layout here in this configuration does conform to the actual space that shows up on our site plan on the building layout itself. The parking table has been revised as requested. The shared parking, I have covered that, and there is a letter that has gone into the file requesting that. And one thing that we have to do, and this is going to have to be worked out, with regards to the shared parking in section F, and this is noted in Will's review, the applicant shall legally assure to the satisfaction of the commission in consultation with the town attorney how staggered hours of operation will continue for the life of the uses. I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will and Scott, but that this has been done to date. So I think this is going to take, we're going to have to sit down with the town attorney and come up with a structure for this agreement and then get back to the commission and have the commission review it. I also, this easement that we have submitted for the coordinated use of the two sites is also going to have to be reviewed by the town attorney. So that's something that's going to have to be done in the future. The next section was the easement instrument. We've submitted a revised easement, and we still need to annotate the survey map so it will define the specific easements that are noted on the plan, and there will be there's legal descriptions that will go along with that. There just wasn't time to prepare those items are really rather boilerplate. 5, the data accumulation plan depicting the parking easements, that has been revised. One of Will's, the last comment was that was with regards to landscaping of the site, and Mr. Fasano has had the site maintained by a professional landscaper since it was constructed back in the 1980s. And when we reviewed the landscaping plan with him, he had a couple of comments. We do realize that in this area here, there is a need to fill in the landscaping. This was never, the landscaping here was never done for whatever reason, I don't know. From here on back, this is all wooded and/or wetlands. As you move around the site along the frontage, there was the bushes, here have just been cut back and trimmed. Now the landscapers told me that they will come back and fill out and they will be green. But this was really done at the request of the tenants. If you're familiar with the center is in it's down gradient from the road, and it's very the center at all if you're coming southbound on Route 111, and they had requested that these be cut down, and that was done recently. It had nothing to do with the application. I didn't even know it was occurring. There is some existing foliage right in this area. Mr. Fasano would like to just keep the plantings as they are along the street frontage, and the same to the right-hand side of the driveway as you're exiting. This area is well landscaped. There is a small area of grass between the exit driveway and the foliage that's maintained there. This area right in front of the building, this is a grass area with one tree in the middle of it. We have added some landscaping in that area, some lower growing shrubs. Will had requested that we do some additional landscaping in these medians that are located in the parking lot. One of the things that happens when you design a parking lot like this with medians is it's very difficult to plow the snow in a parking lot like this. And so these areas, these medians become areas for snow storage. And it's, Mr. Fasano has said over the years, he started out, there were plantings in here, they just didn't survive the winter, and that also applies to the ends of the islands. That there are trees in the ends of the islands if you go by and take a look at the site. But between these medians being used as snow storage, and what happens is when people do park here, there's a walkway here and there's a walkway here. People just don't use them. They just, whatever's there, they just trample over it. Mr. Fasano does yearly remulch these medians, but he would request not to be required to add any additional landscaping into these areas.
Problem is that design would have been, should have been flat.
It should have. This kind of parking is difficult when you're forcing people to step over landscape islands. They're not going to park their car here and then walk down to here. It just doesn't happen. They just cross over it, and like I said, it's difficult for snow removal. You can't, across the street at Village Square, they can push the whole parking lot to one side of the parking lot with a plow. You can't do that here.
Yeah,
You end up having to store it in the medians. That concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Well,
How many people can sit in this banquet hall?
can you do a sewer capacity analysis?
There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 large tables and 2 small tables. If we could get 6 to 8 people at each one of the large tables, and 5 at the smaller ones. So there's a potential for, I would say, I'm guessing it, how many people you can sit at one of those larger round tables. That I would say that could equate to 50 people.
And that might not equate to the fire code and the building code. That might be high for the building and fire. You don't remember what your septic numbers were? 'Cause you had to do the septic numbers, didn't you?
Yes. That might be it. I know when we did look at the septic numbers, and I spoke to the chief engineer at the state health department, because they regulate this septic system and not the town. Surprisingly, there is not a number in the state health code for a catering facility.
This says 75 seats.
Right, so the septic capacity was done for 75 seats. So that would have been, we would have incorporated a factor of safety into that. That would mean that what we would really expect to get here would be 50 people.
And again, I don't think the fire building
Yeah,
is going to give you 70 people. I'm not doing-
Actually, give you more,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
15
yeah.
square feet per person.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you get like 130.
Yeah, because that's a really big space for
Oh, it is that big?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't think it was
70
that big.
people.
because you could cram in a lot more tables.
A lot more tables.
It's pretty spacious.
You're talking 2,000 square feet. You're gonna lose a little bit with some of this other stuff, but
Well, these areas are part of this and this and this are not.
Yeah, actually, it would
That
be,
it's a little over 1,900 square feet, so these get deducted.
Right, what's the area of where the tables are, just the usable?
You still probably have
square footage?
1,400 square feet.
Pardon?
You would probably still have about 1,400 square feet where the tables would be.
I wouldn't, I would think that that could be the count there.
Yeah, so maybe you're at 90 people.
I just see rooms for a lot more tables. I know they're saying they're not gonna have more tables. I just see room that they could put a lot more tables.
I think depending upon the event, that could be the case.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think we've all been to enough catering facilities that, depending upon what is occurring, they could utilize more tables.
Just seeing this plan for now, I don't have any other questions. I'll have to look over it a little bit better. I'm all set.
Jonathan?
As of right now, I don't see any problem with the parking waiver of the 13 spaces. I don't have any questions.
Yeah, same with me, I don't see any problem with the parking waiver. I've been there plenty of times. It's pretty open there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the parking lot is pretty empty all the time, but, so is the parking count that you've calculated, is that based on the number of tables that you've shown, or is it based on the square
Based on the
footage?
square footage, we only have one standard for restaurant food service, and it's 18 spaces per 1,000.
Whether it's a banquet hall or,
There's no distinction in the current code. We have worked on some drafts to address that issue. But the 18 is a high number for all the different food uses that we were looking at in the draft. So I would say 18 is a worst case scenario right now.
okay. And if the applicant's looking for a waiver, wouldn't that be ZBA? That would have to-
Well, it's not a waiver, it's shared parking.
Shared parking.
In recognition that the other uses on the site have different peak demand hours for parking, therefore there's an overlap.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, but isn't that still considered a?
No,
It's technically
It's
not
not
a
a waiver.
waiver. Parking.
you're adjusting the parking accordingly based on that, and it's, and it can go away if the part of that Dave was saying about the legally assured was that if circumstances of the hours and stuff change, that could affect the ability to have them. Or something else going in that would affect, like putting in 3 more restaurants in the center would probably not be doable.
Right. And one of those spaces is unoccupied, but you've considered that as retail. Yeah.
That's correct.
But it could be another restaurant, for example. Yeah. Regarding this entrance of the customers, it appears that it's a separate entrance dedicated for the banquet hall,
Yes.
so that the customer could not go from one space to the other?
No,
That's the intent.
that's the intent.
So the entrances would not be modified?
No.
And it has its own bathrooms, right?
Right.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
Those are
it's
existing
going to have,
bathrooms?
this is to be self-contained.
But those are existing bathrooms that you're talking?
No, they're going to have to be added.
Okay, for this occupant, yeah.
Mm.
And then does that then trigger changes to the septic system?
No, that, the utilization of this, has been, covered, and as I said, we worked on this with the state health department because there isn't any, when you look at the health code, it doesn't specifically, a lot of things in the health code say if you have a bedroom, you have 150 gallons. If you have a seat in a restaurant, you have 30 gallons. They recognize that in a catering facility, you don't have 7-day-a-week utilization of the facility. The utilization goes up and down depending upon the size of the party. And so what we did was we mutually came to an agreement that said, this is what we would expect. We have plenty of capacity in the septic system,
Well, because
even if they went over it.
the restaurant's considered an assembly space, and assembly spaces require quite a few toilet facilities.
Well, it goes by, under the health code, it goes by the seats in the restaurant at 30 gallons per day per seat. And believe
Regardless of the
me,
number of-
we don't get there in
Yeah.
Monroe.
Okay.
You might get there on the post road in Fairfield, but I've looked at a lot of restaurant water usages in Monroe. We don't get there.
Okay.
I have no questions related to the site plan. The only question I have, basically for Will, is what do we have to do, or what steps have to be taken for this legal document?
The legally assured part,
Yes.
you know, I'm trying to remember, we actually have done this once before, I believe.
Oh, good.
I'm
That'll
trying to
that'll be
remember where
very
that
helpful.
was, though.
That'll be helpful.
And I forget whether we did some kind of agreement on the land records, or it was based on the approval conditions.
Well, I
have
guess
to
my
go back
big
and look
question
at it.
is this something that has to come back to the commission? Or can that be a, more or less a condition of approval, that gets worked out between staff, the town attorney, and the applicant?
Well, it's to your satisfaction, so you have to, at some level, agree to it or accept it. Whether you delegate that completely to staff and town attorney, you only have to come to comms with the words to the satisfaction of the commission, so, I mean, you are supposed to be satisfied with it. So, delegating it makes you satisfied, because you complied. So that's really up to you, I guess.
What does the commission think?
Well, I say leave it up to the staff.
Leave it to staff.
You know, if the town attorney is going to sign on to something, chances are we're not going to dispute what he is recommending. So I think that's something that can be worked out with the attorney and staff and the applicant.
Specifically easement. you're referring to.
I'm talking about, the easement, and on page 3, under E, applicant shall legally assure to the satisfaction of the commission in consultation with the town attorney how staggered hours of operation will continue for the life of the project, or the life of the uses. So if another restaurant moves into that vacant space, and now we have a conflict with purpose, how does that get addressed? That's what this has to be determined by the town attorney.
I mean, the middle road too, is you can make it a condition, but that, after it works its way through staff and attorney, you see it at the end for 5 minutes at a meeting, plus.
Well, if another restaurant came in, they'd have to come before
Well,
the board and get approval, right?
That's what has to be, what has to be determined, what,
Wouldn't they?
No, we're not, this isn't, I mean, Jenny's is the applicant, but if Jenny's sells to
No, another.
Thomason, it doesn't matter.
No, the vacant restaurant. I mean, the vacant
Oh,
space.
if the vacant space wanted to be a restaurant, they would have to come to you.
Right, which would then probably require
Right.
additional parking.
Right, and
That would have to be addressed at that time.
exactly.
Yeah. So that should address that concern, right?
I would think so.
Yeah.
So my big question is, does this have to come back to the commission, or is this something that we can wrap up and
I think.
give to?
Again, my answer is, you have to interpret what to the satisfaction of the commission does. You
Well,
have
the
to be
commission has
satisfied.
indicated to me that they would be satisfied letting the town attorney and staff work it out. And I tend
That's
to
fine.
agree with that.
That's fine. Then you can
Does the
condition
applicant have any
accordingly.
issues with that?
No. I think that's a good way to follow through on it.
All right, well, staff have any other questions or comments?
Just to follow up on the bathrooms for this facility. So, are you gonna need 2 bathrooms for the facility?
I don't know. That's a building.
2 bathrooms, meaning men's and women's?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I do, okay.
I would think so
What
with
about
this
that?
occupancy.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because there are some places you can have one,
Well, that's only if it's like
small, right, yeah.
Well, they're
15
gonna
people.
definitely need a men's and a women's.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How many fixtures is
Okay.
gonna be
And you're gonna need
determined by
more-
the occupancy.
You're gonna need more women's automatically. because
Well,
it's-
within the bathroom, then
Right.
separate
More,
bathrooms,
yeah. But you're definitely gonna need men's and women's.
Okay. So, I mean, that obviously has to be part of this plan, because it's not on the plan, but they have to meet those requirements in order to occupy.
That's gonna be part of their building permit
Yeah, I get it.
requirements.
I get it. The only thing with regards to the landscaping, you know, in the one places that I would really recommend that landscaping be put back or added is that front island.
To clarify, which is the front island? The one along the street?
No,
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 The
the one
first-
closest to the building?
this one.
right here,
That one?
right there.
Yeah,
There's a tree there?
there
now?
is a tree.
There is a tree, but it's a
There
pretty
is a-
good sized island, I would put.
Can we get a couple of shrubs in there?
We can put some shrubs in.
Okay.
Plastic,
All right, so you're gonna
plastic.
Something that won't burn in the winter.
Commission okay with that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
No.
Mr. Borkman, anything else?
No. Thank you for your time and your
We're
consideration.
going to consider this closed, and you'll work out the details with.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Second. All right, moving on, item number 11, extensions. SCP 2016-10, file 1580A, 387 Main Street. We have a letter from the applicant, Stephanie Suites Hotel. On behalf of B.N. Mahesh, we respectfully request an extension of an additional 90 days to the above referenced matter to provide additional time for meeting the conditions of approval. The current expiration date for plan signatures is September 19th, 2017. We appreciate your consideration in this matter. Is this related to that appeal that's pending? Is that why they're not filing?
Yeah, actually, this is our internal timelines. They are working on something final. In fact, I have them on my desk right now for review. So that's what this is, but their issue really is they're coming to that timeline in the approval for the plans to be signed, but they're also at bay because of the litigation. So just to be sure and clear, we asked them to get this extension to keep it alive, and it seems fine, so I think it's a good idea.
It's a hotel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an issue I'm trying to work out with them too on their survey, that there's a survey required down on Brook Street. I'm having problems getting the survey from them because of lack of information available. So I'm trying to work that out with Aquarian Water and haven't been able to resolve it yet.
But it's not an issue related to the applicant not performing. It's something beyond their control.
Well, it's an issue related to, they may be in a position where, they're saying they're in a position where they can't meet the condition of the approval, and I think they can, and I'm trying to work that out.
Okay.
So I'll keep you posted.
All right, so we have a request for a 90-day extension. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, if you did, I'm sorry, you did see the others, I don't remember, for deliberation from
Okay, yeah, well,
officially.
Bruno and Jonathan
Yes,
proceeded.
thank you. Sorry.
Okay. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the extension, 90-day extension to 387 Main Street.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Call the roll, starting with Bruno.
Mayne, yes?
Kelly, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay. Next up, SUB 2017-02, file 1262C, 716 Wheeler Road. Dear Mr. O'Hara, on behalf of our client, Gary Howden, this letter is to request an additional 90-day time extension in order to satisfy provisions of the June 22nd, 2017 approval by the Planning Commission and for reporting the approved subdivision plan. Any background on this?
I don't know why the first 9 days, or he's got to wait for them, but this is, if I remember correctly, I think the plans have been finalized. They just have to come in and do some filing and give us the thing that they worked out with the bank, which took them a little longer than they had. They had to get a release from the mortgage company, and that took them longer than they anticipated. But my understanding is they worked that out,
Okay.
but they haven't given us the paper.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the 90-day extension for 716 Wheeler Road.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Call the roll, starting with Bruno.
Mayini, yes.
Form Kelly, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay. Next up, item number 12, bond releases or reductions. 1111 SEP, file 15038, 585 Main Street, bond release. This is for, Meineke. They've requested a bond release. We have a bond release report from the town engineer indicating that all the work has been completed. And he's recommending the release of the entire $4,000 bond. You have a motion?
I make a motion for the bond release of 585 Main Street.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, any discussion? Anything from staff?
Took a long time.
Took a long time, but we finally got them to do.
Call the roll.
Mayini, yes.
Form Kelly, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
Okay, moving on, we have no modifications. Item number 14, meeting minutes. Okay, let's see, August 3rd. Porter, Ambrosi, Kelly, and Mayini are up on this one. Any motion? Well, it's gotta be one of you three.
Oh, man, he was going. I was reading still, sorry.
Motion to approve meeting minutes dated August 3rd, 2017.
Second.
Okay. Any corrections? Any notices or anything that? All right, seeing none, call the roll.
Mayini, yes.
Form Kelly, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Casey abstains.
Casey abstained. Meeting minutes, August 24th. Porter, Ambrosi, Lisi, Kelly, and Mayini.
Motion to approve meeting minutes dated August 24th, 2017.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any corrections or clarifications required? No, hearing none. Call roll.
Mayini, yes.
Form Kelly, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Porter, yes.
Lisa, yes.
All right, moving on. 15, application deliberations determinations. What are we doing with the zoning text amendment? Deliberate on that?
Up to you. Next
Well,
step.
There's a draft.
Well, we've made
We've made some changes.
We
right?
made some changes tonight.
So I think we should,
Well, no, we can deliberate on it
okay.
and make comments. We're not gonna vote on it tonight, but we can deliberate on it. What do you think?
I think that we should make the changes with the 45
First, you
days.
think we should deliberate on it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Jonathan.
We should make the change with the 45 days as a recommended time frame rather than the mandatory time frame.
Okay. And that would be in amendment number 1 and amendment number 3, and amendment number 6, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What other comments? Anybody? Nothing going on? Nothing. Paul?
There was some other item we discussed.
Well, we discussed, listing potential criteria for a public hearing.
Oh, great, yeah, I didn't think we should.
Yeah,
have
I agree,
specific criteria.
I agree with you. I think that, I think the way it's worded now leaves it open for us to put it to a public hearing, but this is not a review or a recap of the approval. The only thing that would be open for a public hearing would be whether or not the extension should be granted. It wouldn't be a rehash of the approved project, so. I think that trying to itemize what would be the reasons for that would be too limiting to us in the future. So if we just say, we have to open a public hearing. And I feel that that's what we have now. I think we should maintain that.
I agree.
So if you think, if we think it's deemed necessary, don't public hearing. Otherwise, you just give an extension?
Right, if, we didn't have any of these tonight, but we had a couple meetings ago, the guy who has that subdivision up, where was it, up by Lake Zor? Somewhere up in that area?
Yeah, Sandbar. Cottage
He
Street.
had come in, he had, I don't know, a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old approval, and he was coming in for an extension. If we felt that that needed to go to a public hearing, we could say, we want to make this a public hearing. But, you know, we didn't. We heard it, we granted the approval, which is what normally happens. I'm just saying there may be extenuating circumstances where we may feel that we want a public hearing.
Without limiting the reasons.
Right.
To just those 5 or 6. There may be other reasons that are legitimate.
So you don't think that we're opening ourselves up to something that if we, say one person we require to have a public hearing, we'd have to have all sorts of reasons why?
No. We're not opening ourselves up to anything.
But at the time
Well-
that you are given the request for the extension, you're going to evaluate whether you whether it needs, or someone may think it needs a public hearing for a particular, so you would have a discussion. It wouldn't just be nilly-willy decision. I mean, I can't imagine that the board as a whole would just come into a meeting and think, well, we're gonna have a public hearing. I mean, someone's gonna have a reason why, and you're gonna talk about it, and then you're gonna make an informed decision, just like you do on everything else, and that's uniform, that's fair, that's equitable. You're not gonna just do it because.
I can't give you a specific example, but hypothetically, if a project was approved 9 years ago for somewhere in town, and then over the course of 9 years, the POCD changed, the development in the area of that approved project changed drastically. It may be that that project that was approved 9 years ago maybe really isn't appropriate for that area any longer. And that would be a situation where we might want to have a public hearing and get input from the town residents about whether or not we should grant an approval for that project. Approval for the extension of that project.
Yeah, but then we would be changing the original approval.
No, we wouldn't be changing the approval, we would be saying whether or not we're going to grant an extension of the approval. We can't change the original approval.
I mean, they have, again, you have to understand, they have a 5-year window to build something. They choose not to build it, they're at the mercy of things that change. I mean, not just your regulations, but state regulations, they could change in that time period. You know, they're not vested just because they have the approval. No project's really vested until they have physical improvements into the ground. So if there are circumstances that warrant something,
Okay.
and you know, it's unlikely you're ever, you know, you'll do it maybe
Like-
1% chance of the whole thing.
I understand why it would come in front of us for certain projects. But like I said, on some of them, why can't we get like a 90-day window or a 60-day window? If they don't comply with that 60-day window with the staff, then.
Has nothing to do with,
it comes
it
in
has
front
nothing
of
to
us.
do with that.
You're confusing the issues. This is, someone gets a project approved. They get a special exception permit for a project. They have 5 years to build that project. If after 4.5 years, they still haven't started, but they know they want to at some point, they have to get an extension on that approval, because that approval expires after 5 years. So they come in and say, you know what, because of economic conditions, because I lost my job, or whatever, we didn't start the project, but I want to start the project, but I won't be starting it before my approval expires. I want that approval to be extended.
No, I understand that part.
That's
what I don't think, I don't think that's what this is, Bob.
Yeah, that's what that is.
That's exactly what that is.
From what my understanding on this whole thing was, if somebody wanted to open up,
That's a different amendment within that
That's
different.
issue.
With-
We're not, that has nothing to do with the 45-day thing with an extension.
no, I got the 40,
And
I'm
the public
talking about
hearing.
the whole, I'm on the other part of it then.
Yeah,
I'm
the
on
other
wrong
part of it is not anything to do with the public hearing. There is no public
Yeah,
hearing.
that has nothing to do with a public hearing.
Okay,
If someone is 95% done with their project, and for whatever extenuating circumstances, they can't complete what is required, they can come to the commission, and that would be like at the next meeting, they would come in.
Yeah, there would be no component for you to have a public hearing.
And that's not a public hearing.
okay. So that's,
And you couldn't decide at the meeting to have a public hearing. You
No, I
would
wouldn't
have to
want a
deal with
public
it.
hearing.
No, we can't.
You
right,
can't, you're not, so it has, those are
right.
apples and oranges.
No, I
Public hearing
understand
is
that.
only for the extension of an approval.
Okay, then I'm with that part.
Okay.
That part I'm with.
Anything else? So we've already discussed that we want to modify the 45 days in those 3 sections.
Okay.
Um,
And that modification would be on the lines of timely, prior to the expiration, but timely so that you can act within a regular scheduled meeting. And that it's basically recommended it should be, 45 days is,
Prior to the expiration.
would be most timely.
Okay. Well, then why don't, general consensus, should we put this forward for an approval draft?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So will you draft
Yep.
up the approval and we'll review that? Um, $235 Monroe Turnpike. Mr. Bjorkman's presentation.
That's Kevin Sullivan.
That's all.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin Sol's presentation. I'm seeing the other one in my head. They've made the majority of the changes to the plan that was required. They added some landscaping to the back buffer, they added the curbs, they added the lattice on the ramps. They've increased some of the landscaping around the front of the building.
I think you want sidewalks.
Well,
Doesn't the P O C D
Recommend,
recommend sidewalks?
they do.
it does.
Oh,
And I think,
I think on a main road.
But it also,
well,
it's also at the discretion of the commission whether or not we require sidewalks. And I'm going to voice my opinion again very strongly that there are no sidewalks on the lower part of Monroe Turnpike.
right, but,
And to,
Except for the one directly across the street
right,
for Goodwill that was put in with a bus stop.
that's not directly across the street.
close to it.
On diagonal.
Across the street from,
Diagonally, directly.
Well, it's several lots down, I think. But on the west side of Monroe Turnpike, there are no sidewalks anywhere
Until you get
until you get up to the bridge.
See,
And when you get past the bridge,
the sidewalks are at, they start at Walgreens. The state of Connecticut just put a sidewalk in.
okay? So when's the town gonna put in the 800 or 900
Well,
feet
we
of
have,
sidewalk?
we
in front of
currently have
Monroe
a study with the MetroCog, and we are gonna be discussing that, when is it, next week or a couple
Well,
weeks
why don't we
ago?
roll the southern part of Monroe Turnpike into that discussion?
It is, that's a large area that we got, public input, that they want from the businesses,
I don't know.
that they want sidewalks. Now, whether that equates to the report saying that they should go in or not, I don't have an answer for you yet, because we haven't, met and discussed that with them yet. But that definitely was, public input. You were at the meeting, you heard some of that public input. Some of them wanted sidewalks. So just,
my question should be, if you don't put sidewalks here, where would you put them? On what road would you put them?
That's not my point. If there were sidewalks along Monroe Turnpike, then I would say yes, that this new development requires sidewalks, but none of the other properties there have sidewalks. And they're not
There's
gonna
still a
have
lot
them
of
in the
areas that need to
foreseeable
be
future.
developed. There's a property just south of that, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's up to a vote of the commission.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel they should be provided. Again, it's up to
I
them.
mean, I wouldn't have a problem if the state didn't do what they did. The state put, I
So
wouldn't have.
Paul
a-
wants sidewalks.
Oh, you put them in Goodwill. You guys did that.
Leon,
I'm for sidewalks for that part.
Jonathan,
No sidewalks.
Bruno,
I'm torn.
you're for them?
I'm torn, I said.
He's torn.
Well,
I turned around and told the guy from the car wash I wanted sidewalks there because you actually see people walking up and down. You actually see people walking there.
Who walks up and down 111?
Please, you obviously don't.
On 111
you do
up
not-
there?
You do not travel.
Up there?
Listen to me, listen to me, I'm not done speaking. I feel like I'm at home right now. So I tell the car wash guy I want him there because I see people walking up and down. And then I come over here and I don't see anybody walking there. But then you look at it and not far away, Goodwill has them. I'm really torn, I'll be honest with you.
I see it as a safety thing,
In
you know?
case of bear.
You have
just across
people
the street.
driving fast on those major roads.
I mean, you do have,
I think a couple other commissioners had concerns about it last meeting they were here.
well, do you want, well, the problem is, if we table this until our next meeting, if these commissioners don't listen to the tape or watch the video, they can't
Right.
participate.
Well, your standard practice, once you see the deliberation, that's it. It's you
Yeah.
five.
It's the five of
That's
us.
us.
wow, so it comes down to me, huh?
Well, I haven't, I stated my opinion, but I haven't
He
given my
hasn't
vote.
given his vote.
I know where you're going. Again, I'm really torn. Like I said, I tell the car wash, yes, over there, and then, you know, you take a look at the landscape over there, you don't really see anybody as frequently on this side of town using them. But then you look up, I mean, and there are certain areas that do have them that aren't very far away.
Do you want a coin?
Do I want a coin? No,
Like
I'm,
you said,
It's an office, where are they walking to?
I'm not worried about yes, I understand the office people,
The other
but
thing is, if you really look at it, if you have something else that wants to develop next door to it, and there's a sidewalk there, you say, listen, there is a sidewalk there, you need to connect.
I agree with you 100%.
So-
and there are two open lots, one near it and one down just a little bit, and are going to be developed.
Yeah, someone's working on plans for the corner.
Yeah.
Right, so if I say yes, I'm gonna say yes to those spots, and then we're gonna start building that chain of sidewalks.
Exactly.
Or you'll probably eventually will connect up to Purdy Hill.
I'm gonna go with yes.
Okay, they have to put in sidewalks. What other issues were there?
Okay, they wanted provisions to work out the parking relative to some component of medical office, which we can easily work out.
Everybody's good with the
I'm good with
office
that.
and medical
I'm
office?
good with all that.
Okay.
The $7,000 bond, obviously well, there's some housekeeping items that were in some labeling and some of the bill door that are getting off the residential notation. And you're approving the buildings for office use, not residential use. So your approval is that they obviously can't use it for offices until they meet your zoning requirements, but also meet whatever building requirements there are for the bathrooms, because they can't use it as is.
Right.
So they do have to make those changes before they can get occupancy, and we don't want to get in a situation where they.
I want to make sure too that the health department is on board with that building 2
Yeah.
septic system.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Do
require.
we have something in writing from them?
Well, we have their comments in the file. They didn't raise an issue.
Everything is pretty much related to the
But-
test pits
Yeah.
and the existing reserve area for building number 1.
They have to sign off in the end anyway, so
All right.
when we get a building permit for the fit out for the building anyway. But we can have them.
Quick
Usually-
question.
Just,
Kevin said that the handicap bathroom is in building 1.
Yeah, they can share, they can
So if you have a
actually have two
handicapped
different,
person in
they
building
can-
2, they have to go to the bathroom in building 1.
they can have two different tenants, and they can share one of the bathrooms as long as they make it accessible available to a handicapped
So it'd
person.
be in like a common hallway that everybody,
No,
You
they
have
just
to go
have,
to the.
they just have to let them in the building and let them use the bathroom.
I don't see how that's, I don't think
yeah,
that's
that's what I'm
allowed by
saying. It's
building
in,
code.
Well,
so Paul, if
that's
you're in
what
building
building
2
is.
and you have to go to the bathroom and you're handicapped, you have to go outside to building 1.
Yeah.
I don't see that as being allowed by the building code.
And then if they're closed, you can't use it, because you can't get in.
Well, even besides that, you have to send a handicapped person
You have to
outdoors
make
to
it
go use the
accessible,
bathroom.
no matter what.
My understanding is
He's saying by
from the building
code, you have to
inspector.
make it accessible.
This is from the building inspector.
No, he just said.
He said buildings within 500 feet, they could do that.
No, but he said like, that they can use one building.
And Bruno, my issue to him was exactly what you said. The whole point of a handicapped bathroom is to give
Make it easier.
to make it
to go to the
easier,
bathroom.
but here you're gonna make them go outside to the next
What if
building.
what if it's snowing out, per se?
Yeah, that's what I said.
And I'm in a
Yeah, I
wheelchair.
don't see how that's allowed. I don't.
And I'm in a, hold on a second. It's snowing outside, I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm in building 2. And I gotta go.
We don't regulate.
Yeah, that's not our.
Right.
No, I'm just saying,
building
it's
code.
just, I find it weird. Just
So-
throwing it out there.
They'll still be responsible for the chief building official's comments regarding the ADA.
Yes,
Okay.
and they're required under federal law to meet the ADA requirements. So if the ADA requirements allow that,
Oh, no.
they're
Yeah,
allowed.
we can't
If they're gonna
override
allow it,
what
I'm
the
all for
building
it, I just
official
find it
No.
weird, that's all.
says, right?
No,
Whether we feel it's right or
Actually,
wrong.
I've never heard going there.
No.
We can't,
We could.
You know what?
we can't
Well, we
override
have
what the
crutches
building
going there.
official says. Whether we agree or disagree or feel that it's not accurate or not, we can't override it. We don't have the jurisdiction to do that, right? I suppose we could question it.
You could question it, and we're beyond that point now, but during the other part, if you didn't like that response, you could have gotten your own investigation to understand it better. It doesn't mean that if it came back and he was right, you could override it, but
Can't we make that a condition of approval?
We are making a condition of approval that they have to meet the building code requirements for ADA and other building requirements in order to occupy,
Yeah.
so.
Well, can we just spell out that specific item as a concern?
We really don't need to, because we're saying that they have to meet all building
Yeah.
code and ADA requirements.
Yeah, so if.
Listen, if they're meeting requirements, it is what it is.
Yeah. So if Jim's wrong,
a little strange to me.
I don't know what to do about that, but he has to sign, okay.
Yeah.
Any other issues with that?
I don't- So we're drafting that?
Drafting it, what are we drafting for this? Approval?
Drafting approval.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, 380 Monroe Turnpike. Jenny's Pizza. I think that the only thing that we really added to the plan was the landscaping at that
Corner.
that island at the west side. They agreed to put a couple of additional shrubs there. Um, Is there anything else? The legal documents
Right.
will be taken care of by you and Jack.
I didn't look at the revised plan that they submitted in regards to, he said he was adding some of the landscaping in that side area.
Yeah, that's on this.
Yeah, it's on there.
No, I know that, but we didn't, I mean, in my comments, I did raise it, so it's in the record, but they were including these green giant arborvitae plantings, which, well, my comment was, I didn't understand why they would do that plant in an internal line between the two properties. It just didn't seem like that make the most sense. I don't know if they changed it with the latest plan or not.
Is that one of your comments?
But that wasn't my original comments before they gave you this plan.
They now have Arrow Viburnum and Gold Flame Spirea.
Oh, seriously. I went from a big tree to a little shrub. Okay.
Well, the viburnum, they have 6 to 8 feet tall.
No, those were the ones they had before. They had viburnum before, didn't they? Yeah, they had viburnum and arborvitae. They changed the arborvitae to the spirea.
And 3 to 4 foot Spirea.
Is there a legend? for
Where
it?
does it say three?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Up by notes.
Okay.
Okay.
So they're putting in good.
No, yeah,
size.
no, it's fine, it's just, that's good. Again, I didn't think putting up 50, 60-foot arborvitae's between these two properties that work together made a whole lot of sense, so having those flowering, smaller things makes more sense. Okay, it's gonna save the money, too.
And then a couple of low shrubs
Yeah,
in that island that you can figure out with Mr. Bjorklund.
okay.
And then we need to approve the sharing of the parking? Is that part of it?
That's the legal document there.
No, you would be granting the sharing,
We're
but the legal
granting the
document.
sharing,
Yeah.
yes.
That needs to be part of the approval.
Yeah,
I don't have any bond recommended. It's not, they're not performance bonds anymore, they're just site stabilization. I can't really see
I don't think it's appropriate
justification.
for this.
Right, I can't really see that justification for it, so.
Anything else anyone thinking about on that? So what do you think we're gonna do? What's the instruction gonna be for Will?
Approve?
Okay. An approval draft.
okay.
And I think that's everything that was open, correct?
I believe so.
All right. Regulations review amendment work session. I don't know, should we, What's next week look like?
I have a couple nights I'm not available.
Well, if next week's no good, we'll just,
And I don't know if anything's going, well, it's during the day, I think, but there is a workshop in the, I circulated to everybody on the 13th, the state POCD.
Yeah, so.
right.
I think that's during the day.
2 o'clock.
There was interest by Don McThomas to come to the next one, but he can't come next week. On that Delmatico issue. You want to schedule something for the last week of September?
Well, the last week, the 27th is the first selectmen debate. So I don't want to do it that night.
All right.
That would be either the 25th, 26th, or 28th.
I'm not available the 28th.
What day? So when's
Yeah,
the-
what do you,
When's the debate?
27th.
So, I think go on Monday or Tuesday, you want to do that?
Monday or Tuesday one?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Which day?
Monday would be better.
All right, let's do Monday the 25th.
Yeah. What time?
5:30?
It's really you guys, I'm here, so.
Well, is it better for you to do it like
The earlier you do it, the better for me, so.
5:30 work for you?
That'll work.
All right, 5:30.
Okay. Do you want me, I'll circulate to Michael?
Yeah, I'll shoot him a text.
Okay.
Correspondence other received, we have nothing. Excuse me. I have nothing to report. Any commissioners have anything to report?
No.
No, that's it. Land use staff reports. You got this.
Well, I do, but in light of what I was told earlier, I'm not sure what to do with this.
What I would like to do is put forth a limited resolution. Here's the situation. Joe Chapman is on vacation. He was off half of this week, he's off all of next week. We have a couple of 2 or 3 issues, not issues, but situations where Joe is the person that is empowered by this commission to sign off on certain things that are timely, and he's not here. And there's no one else that can sign off on it. So Will and I discussed the possibility of the commission designating someone else to act on Joe's behalf in his absence on a limited, specific list of items for a specific period of time. Some issues came up, though, that we the commission, although we empower the ZEO, we don't select the ZEO. He's appointed by the first selectman. So the way I would like to handle this is that I would like this commission to put forth a resolution granting Will as a designated agent for the commission to perform a limited number of specific tasks from today through
15th.
the 15th, September 15th at end of business.
It sounds like you're saying though it's, we don't have authorization to do that because
Well,
No, we
they're
have,
here's what I,
originally selected by the
let me
first.
finish. The first selectman selects the ZEO. The commission empowers the ZEO. So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We're going to empower Will to do these limited number of things, and then tomorrow morning, Scott will go to the first selectman and get him to be a part of the resolution also.
If it's based on that, I mean, you can do that action. If it's based on that, though, I don't think you need to do anything. First selectman can do it all on his own. Because the code already says in it, the zoning enforcement officer or designated agent.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't there something in place already
It
for
already
this
says that in
issue?
the code.
I mean, the guy's gonna take vacation. Hasn't he taken
So
vacation
if
before?
it comes down to the first selectman
Well, not for.
choosing who is the ZEO, who is the designated agent,
Yeah, there must.
you've already empowered the code, both those things.
So then we don't have to take any action.
Yeah, I mean, my
If
discussion.
that comes down to the fact that the first selectman actually is the designator of the person, yeah, I don't think you need to do anything based on what the code already says.
And that's kind of what the town attorney said, but he said just to be on the conservative side, he suggested that you guys make a resolution for the purpose of being specific about it, because the ZEO does other things too. I mean, you're empowering him to do zoning stuff, but anyway, my conversation with the town attorney was that he suggested that you do it for the purpose of issuing the resolution to kind of focus in on the specific things that you're looking for him to do. And then, because of the ambiguity of the whole thing, it's a little vague. I think what we'll try to do in the future is kind of pin that down a little bit better and get it completely clarified so that when this happens again in the future, we can just slide right into it.
Well, from a zoning point of view, what steps do you think we need to take?
Well, again, he was suggesting that.
No, I said will.
Oh, I'm sorry.
From a zoning regulation point of view, what steps do we need to take?
To effectuate this happening today?
To enable you to handle those COs and permit applications that are that need to be signed?
Yeah, well, if you're going to take any action, we need to modify this wording to be in lines with what the minimization was talked about. I don't really think you need to do anything, because section 9.4.1 of the zoning regulations say, with regards to certificate of zoning compliances, shall be required from the zoning enforcement or a designated agent thereof. If the first selectman is the person who picks who those people are, he can pick a designated agent.
So then we don't, what I will do is I will send the first selectman an email telling him that we would like him to
Designate me
designate you
in Joe's absence.
as the agent for the commission in
Right.
Joe's absence.
Correct.
And
And if you want to limit that, that's fine. You can-
is everyone good with that?
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
And the town attorney suggested that you make that for specific functions, or are you gonna make it tough?
I'm gonna have the first selectman make Will the designated agent for the commission. And leave it at that. Any other reports, comments, questions, concerns, issues? All right, hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion.
To adjourn.
Adjourn?
Right.
So moved at